Hey everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we have Allan Lokos, and he's going to be sharing his incredible story and his life story, which we're going to find out a little bit more about in a few minutes. So welcome, Allan.
Thank you so much. Happy to be with you.
So tell me, show us your book that you've written, and I want to hear the story.
Happy to do so. There we are.
Through the Flame. Tell us a little bit about what the book is about and what initiated the book.
Well, on Christmas Day 2012, my wife and I were traveling in Burma, essentially holiday and some study, and we were in a plane crash. And I was very seriously injured to the extent that the doctors in Burma, or Myanmar if you wish, and then after that in Bangkok, Singapore, and New York, essentially all said I wouldn't live. My wife was also injured, and of course had to deal with tremendous trauma trying to save me and keep me alive. When I actually got through and did live, as you see, here I am.
Yes.
There were a lot of questions. How could all those doctors be wrong? And of course, I'm a meditation teacher and author, so many questions centered around how did meditation and mindfulness practice participate in this experience and help me live through it. So that's what the book is about.
Yeah. So what do you remember? Can you tell us a little bit about what you remember about the plane crash and what happened and your feelings, emotions, and everything when the moment happened?
Sure. May I preface that by just saying that this subject is difficult, it's scary, and I would just like for anyone who is listening to this to be aware that I am alive. I'm doing very well. This is something I learned from my trauma therapist who's been helping me since the crash. Very important to realize that the person, in this case me, is alive, doing well, things are good.
Okay.
So we left on Christmas morning, 8 a.m. There were 71 people on board. And what seemed to me, I was not looking out the window, so I just seemed to think we were coming down for a landing. I didn't know at that time that we were way off course, came down easily a mile from the little airport to which we were heading. And it seemed to be just a very bad landing, kind of crashing, bumping, swirling around kind of thing. My wife immediately said, "We've crashed." I didn't respond verbally, but I thought, oh, she's overreacting.
Right.
But immediately the plane began to fill with a thick, black, noxious smoke. I looked out the window and the plane almost immediately was just blazing in fire. What had happened was that this model plane carries its fuel in the wings. And the wings coming down sheared through heavy electrical cables that sparked, and the plane burst into flame.
Wow.
We tried to, everyone else, jumped up immediately, started heading for the front, but no one was moving, and there was, it was just panic in the plane. I threw up my arms and yelled out to everyone, "Be calm, we'll all get out safely," but of course no one was listening to me. My wife then said, "I'll never make it out the front, I'm already choking on this smoke." We looked to our left and saw that the emergency exit was probably just popped open in the crash. And it was blaze and flames. I mean, if you were going to go out the emergency exit, you literally would have to go through fire. And I said to her right away, "There's no choice. If we can't go out the front, we have to go right through that door." And I had a quick flash in my memory of running a finger right through a candle flame. If you do it quickly enough, you don't get burned.
Yes.
Said to her, just fast, right through it. And then I said, "Are you ready?" And she said, "Yes." And I gave her a push and she went right out. And my intention was to follow right after her. But unfortunately, my foot caught on something, I don't know what, and I was stuck and I was in the fire. And that was the big problem. All of my injuries were all burned. It turned out that about 33% of my body was seriously burned. Today, they don't use the term third-degree burn anymore. They say full thickness through to the tendons and bones. It was
Oh
bad.
my goodness. Wow. And was it your whole body or what portions were getting?
Third, my legs from the ankles on up. Fortunately and unfortunately, I had real shoes on, so that protected my feet.
Hmm.
But it was something that caught on my shoe, which I learned much later, that such was the desire to live, that instinct, that I had actually pulled so hard that I ripped through the leather to get out of the plane.
Wow.
My arms were burned, my hands badly burned. 2 years after the accident, you see, I'm still wearing compression gloves.
Wow.
Which are very useful. They soften and flatten scar tissue.
Wow.
They thought these would be off within a year, but the scars still haven't matured, which is actually good.
Yeah.
There's still healing going on.
Uh-huh.
So, in the midst of something rather awful, I have been incredibly fortunate.
Okay, so when you're sitting in there basically in the flames with your foot stuck, how did mindfulness come at all or did just survival instinct kick in? Because I mean, as you said, you tore off the sole of your shoe.
Right. I would say that probably both. The fight or flight instinct is so basic and so powerful. Um, but at the same time, the way I described it in the book was that in that moment of being caught in the flames, I knew I was scared. I was terrified.
Right.
But the key thing is, I knew that. I was fully present to the situation, and I think that that is what mindfulness is about. I was aware of what was happening. There was no panic whatsoever. I knew I had to free my foot, and I knew I had to do it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say both were at play.
Yeah.
The awareness and the presence to be able to do what was necessary. Only you don't get a lot of time in a situation like that.
Right. Do you feel then that if you hadn't been mindful, do you ever wonder what would have been the result?
Oh, I'd be dead.
So it was just being mindful so that all your energy could be focused on getting your foot out the door. And if you weren't mindful of being scared, then why do you think you would have been dead?
Well, when you think about the fact that doctors in 4 different countries, now, to be really blunt about this wasn't one doctor in a far off land who maybe had a year in medical school.
Right.
This was all the way through Bangkok, Singapore, where there's a first-rate burn unit, and then to New York City, where there's one of the best burn units in the world. And I was fortunate enough to end up with one of the great burn surgeons in the world. All said I was likely to die. So then you say, why didn't I die?
Yeah.
And the link there, I can't prove this, obviously, but it just seems to me it has to do with many years of mindfulness practice. It has to do not only with the way I dealt with the incident inside the plane, which probably wasn't more than 45 seconds, 45 seconds of being caught in the fire. But that's a lot if you're on fire.
Yeah.
Might have only been 30 seconds. The doctors I asked them to, and doctors were great helping me with the medical information for the book. They said it was very difficult to estimate. Even 10 seconds could have killed somebody in that circumstance.
Wow.
That's jet fuel, which is incredibly hot.
Wow.
So when you realize that these doctors all came to the same conclusion, and yet I didn't die, at least not then, then you have to say why.
Yeah.
And to me, the obvious place to look, is all of those years of practice.
Your wife sitting there watching you, was she unconscious on the ground or was she just watching you getting burned alive?
She was injured in the crash itself, but probably didn't realize that for a while. Her main concern when she looked, she landed on the ground. It
Mm-hmm.
was not a very long jump because the landing gear never went down. So the plane landed on
Oh
its
my
belly.
God. My God.
So she was on the ground. She had to back away from the plane because the heat was so intense.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
turned back looking for me to jump, and I wasn't there, and that just scared her
Yeah.
endlessly. She
Yeah.
yelled and yelled for me. I, of course, didn't hear that. When I finally got to the door, she yelled, "Jump, jump," and I did. She immediately tried to pull me away from the plane, knowing that it could explode at any moment, which it
Mm.
did. Um,
Wow.
she needed help to get me away from the plane. Some wonderful people immediately grabbed on and pulled me. I couldn't walk, but I didn't have any sense of, oh, I can't walk. This is terrible. She said we have to move, and I couldn't, and
Yeah.
that's all.
Yeah.
So people helped, got me away from the plane. Um, but all that time, my sense was that I was calm. A couple from California who actually contacted us later, and we even had a wonderful meeting at one point in New York. It was very emotional and wonderful.
Mm.
They said that in that time I was absolutely calm. I had a calm conversation with the gentleman who was helping me, and we both remember the exact same conversation. So I think our memories, were accurate.
Right.
And that to me, again, is a factor of mindfulness
Right.
practice, which
Yeah.
begins with a sense of calm.
Yeah. And so, of the 70 or so people that were on the plane, you guys got out. What happened to the people who were pushing in front, trying to get out, had you gone that route?
Anywhere from some got out completely uninjured and some didn't get out at all.
Oh no. So that could have been your fate had you not jumped through the flames.
Well, the Buddhists speak about causes and conditions, which is called dependent origination, all of the factors that come together to bring this exact moment.
Yes.
And an example of that is the couple sitting directly in front of us, totally uninjured. Then my wife Susanna and I, injured but alive, and the woman sitting behind us, who happened to have been our guide for the whole week before,
Mm.
died.
Oh wow.
So uninjured, injured, killed.
Wow. Wow. There's so many things that are traumatic from that event. From the guide who I'm sure you spent time with dying to just your own personal trauma versus all the people on the plane. I mean, I can't even imagine um, what it must be like. And when you look at that event, it's on Christmas Day. Do you see any significance on that? Do you go into that mystical realm and go, gosh, why did this all happen around Christmas Day? Why did this happen to me? Do you ask the questions why, or as a Buddhist you just meditate and say, that's not helpful thinking. That goes into story, not helpful.
Well, Christmas is a great holiday.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't really attribute any significance to the fact that it was Christmas Day, other than perhaps it's, one of the really lousy Christmas presents I ever received.
Okay.
But then again, on the other hand, I really believe that it was a tremendous gift. I could have been killed. My wife could have been killed. My wife was centimeters from being paralyzed. She
Wow.
suffered 4 broken vertebrae. She
Wow.
still is dealing with physical pain and trauma.
Hmm.
For her, the emotional trauma was much worse than it was for me. I had the physical trauma, she had the emotional trauma, plus physical pain.
Yeah.
So, in a certain sense, it was a gift, but it's not a gift that I would have asked for.
Right.
It certainly wasn't high on my wish list, and I don't ever wish it for anyone else.
Yeah.
But it happened, and
Yeah.
that's all. It's not a matter of why did that happen. Maybe it's my Buddhist leanings, but the reason it happened is that My wife and I made a decision to go to Myanmar. It was, I think, a very good decision. The country is developing at this point. It's moving slowly toward democracy. We wanted to support that as tourists.
Mm-hmm.
We made the decision to get on that plane that morning. No one forced us to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I picked the 2 seats. They were the next available seats. I said, let's sit here. No one whatsoever to blame. No one to try to get even with.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe very much that approach is and has been significant to my healing.
Yeah.
That there isn't any why me.
Yeah.
I'm going to get even with. So that pilot didn't want to crash the plane.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
You know, that had to be the worst thing that ever happened in his life.
Right.
And when people say to me, "Do you ever wonder why me?"
Mm-hmm.
The only answer to that question is, "Why not me?"
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm.
I happened to be on that plane.
Do you
No
go
one
down
was
the
out
path
yet.
that must have been my karma? Somehow there are some life lessons, something balancing force that the universe was have happened either through me or through the experience or something larger than that. Do you go down that path?
Well, karma is a very complex subject. Karma is not, just to start from this perspective, is not that kind of linear tit for tat kind of event that the Western culture has kind of seen it.
Wait, and by that do you mean, oh, you must have done something horrible, which is why you're now going through a plane crash, which is what the traditional ways, like you have bad karma, that's why you had the plane crash.
Yeah, but I
Okay.
think that's
Yeah, I don't
certainly
think
from the
that.
Buddhist perspective, that's a total misperception.
Okay.
There are traditions that do believe in a very rather straightforward linear perspective when it comes to karma. The Buddhist view is much more complex and not an easy 1 or 2 line explanations. But we can do this. We can say again that each moment in time, every event in time, is influenced by every other moment that has preceded it and what is surrounding it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, from this perspective, one can change one's karma at any time by changing causes. Again, the Buddhists speak of causes and conditions. If there is an abusive situation, an unfair situation that we want to change, we can't change the results because the results have happened.
Right.
But we can change the conditions so that those results don't happen again, or at least so that they're modified. So no, I don't believe that somewhere back in previous lives I did some terrible thing, although from the perspective of certain Buddhist tracts, I have lived so many lifetimes that I have done every act imaginable. I have been everyone's mother, father, brother, sister, as they have all been mine. That goes way back. That's a bit complex for me. I have a rather simple, straightforward, and I hope slightly scientific view.
Yeah.
The karmic imprint of that moment, for me, it's enough to know that I got on the plane, my choice, chose my seats, and then there were all the other little moments. The fact that I turned around and tried to help others put me in a slightly different physical position than I would have been otherwise. The fact that I turned to my wife, the fact that my main focus was on her safety, I wouldn't change that for an instant. The only thing that I would change even now is that I wouldn't want her to be in pain. But I don't get to make that choice. That's already happened.
Yeah.
Now, my choice and her choice is to deal with this situation without causing additional suffering. And I think that's what we're working on.
So there are causes and conditions. So I'm trying to map that causes and conditions idea to what you just said. So are the causes like it was my initiation to get on the plane. Those are the causes, you know, and here are all the things that you did, because you said karma is all the different actions that are leading up into that moment, whether they be in past lives or at, you know, the hour before. So those are the causes, and then the condition is what your mind state is when that happens. Is that right? So when you're there, are you a frantic mess when they pull you off the plane, or are you in the condition that you're in? Buddhist, meditating, calm dude. Is that what you mean by causes and conditions?
I love the description. Yeah, I think all of that is true, and I think there's more, because I was not the only one involved in the causes. There's the pilot. There is the person, perhaps, for whom I stepped back and, you know, let them go ahead of me onto the plane, so they were a seat in front of me. Many, many conditions. Plus, we can go back and back and back to what the Tibetans refer to as before beginningless time, all leading up to that moment. So for me, there is no point in, oh, if only, or why did I? Being free of that, and I mean really being free, not struggling to be free of it and trying to believe in that, but that's just not there for me. Why did I? Why didn't? Why did this happen? It's just not part of it. I believe that allows the body to do what only it can do, and the body heals incredibly. The body is miraculous. It's actually the name of a chapter in my book, is the miraculous body. The body just starts to heal. Cut your finger in the kitchen, immediately it's starting to heal. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, had your mindset been, oh, that plane, I knew that pilot was no good when I saw him or her, or why did I let that person go in front of me? They ended up unscathed, and why wasn't the guide sitting up front? You know, like all those kind of things are kind of mind states and thinking that probably would not, like you said, I wonder whether you would have lived had you added your own personal suffering to your physical suffering.
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, if you consider the doctor's view and how close I was to death, then we don't know, another 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds in the fire could have been all that my body could take. And also, as you just pointed out, the stress of that kind of thinking that you just laid out just might have been too much for the body to handle. And those are unanswerable questions. They waste one's time. It takes one out of the present. You know, we all have only a limited time in this lifetime. And the only time that we can live is right now in this moment. So why didn't I? Why shouldn't I? You know, learn from what we've done and what we've said so that we can grow, so that we can advance more skillfully. But guilt, no. Remorse, when useful. Determination, those can be our allies.
Okay, so we talked about suffering, dukkha, and I saw a video on your website, Allan Lokos, ALLANLOKOS.com, for folks who want to get the book and know more about your experience. And so you talk about the Four Noble Truths, and I'm wondering how that knowledge, first of all, what is the Four Noble Truths for people who aren't familiar, and how do you think, if at all, that affected your experience in recovering?
Yes, I think that an understanding of the Four Noble Truths for me, has been very significant related to this event. So the Four Noble Truths, these were essentially the first teachings of the Buddha. He met up with old friends and told them he had discovered the middle way. He had, the young Buddha Siddhartha, before becoming an awakened being, was raised in a luxurious setting. He left that, practiced extreme austerities. He found that neither of those extremes really worked for him, and the middle way was going to be the way to alleviate suffering and be happier. So the first of those truths, he said, I have seen the noble truth of dukkha, of suffering. And by the way, he did not say life is about suffering. He did not say the purpose of life is suffering. I think people often...
I've heard that before, yeah. Misquotes, huh?
That's really quite diametrically opposed to what he was saying. What he's saying, in essence, when he says, I have seen this truth, is that interwoven in the fabric of life, within the fabric of life, with its joys and its pleasures and its happiness, is also this element of dukkha, which we translate as suffering, stress, distress, unhappiness, almost any form of unhappiness, even just slightly, or the big stuff, the loss of a loved one, bad news about one's own health, old age, sickness, being separated from what we love, having to be associated with what we don't like. Those are all forms of dukkha. And I tend to say dukkha because it's so difficult to translate. Certainly it doesn't translate well into one word.
Yeah.
But so the Buddha says, I have seen the truth of this and the existence of it.
I've seen the truth of suffering and I've seen the existence of suffering.
Same thing.
Yeah, no, okay, I've seen the truth and existence.
Related to my experience on that plane, it means that this was an event of dukkha. This happens. Things happen in life, which is why I say, well, why not me? I've had, some people might say I've had a lot of it. I think I've had very little of it. It's the words plane crash are very dramatic. People tell me I lived their worst nightmare. But I know people who've been more seriously injured in a plane crash, or being, in an automobile accident, or being hit by an automobile. But plane crash scares us. We're in a situation where we don't feel we have any control. So it draws a lot of attention. But that's the first noble truth is there is dukkha, there is suffering, it's just this unhappiness. Second noble truth is so significant because the Buddha then says, I have seen the noble truth of the cause. So he's saying that this is not destiny, this is not arbitrary, but dukkha has a cause always. And then the third noble truth is identifying that cause. He said, I have seen the noble truth of the cause. And that cause, he said, is always about craving, clinging, grasping, that endless desire. Now that might seem at first hearing to be somewhat narrow.
Yeah.
But if you really examine it, our unhappiness essentially is about wanting something to be different than the way it is. And we cling to that. Even in the most serious situation, let's say we'll go right to the top of dukkha and say the loss of a loved one.
Or let's just even take your burning in the airplane, or your medical recovery after people are saying that you're gonna die. I mean, did they say to you, Allan, I'm sorry, I don't think you're gonna live, or did you?
Well, they didn't say it to me. They said it to my wife. I did overhear one.
Yeah, I mean that's.
Well, okay. So to show you that, my real dukkha was not so much in the plane, although I was scared, or in the hospitals. Yes, there's a lot of surgery and grafting and all of that sort of thing, but my real dukkha began when I was home because I was very weak. I mean, literally, I could not turn on my electric toothbrush.
Wow.
I didn't have enough strength in my hands to push that button.
Wow.
I had lost 25 pounds off of a 182-pound frame.
Wow.
My hands were so sensitive, I couldn't touch anything. They were had just come out of bandages. They were tremulous. I could do nothing for myself. Couldn't feed myself. I couldn't wash myself. I couldn't wipe myself. Nothing. I had to make a transformation from a giver to a receiver.
Wow.
And I didn't like it.
Yeah,
I
that's
liked
hard.
helping. And the helplessness. And all I would say day after day was, I want my life back. So how does that translate to suffering? I'm clinging, grasping at something that I couldn't have. So there wasn't an enormous amount of physical pain. It was the emotional turmoil of clinging to something that I couldn't have. I want my life back. And at a certain point, that began to change. And instead of clinging, I began to realize I will not have every aspect of that life back, but I will have this life in which I have my loving family, my work. I love to teach and I love to write, and I could do it. I couldn't write with my hands at first, so friends gave me software, dictation software. Turned out to be fun. By the way, tangent, do you know Myanmar through dictation software is me and Ma? Love it. It's great stuff. I mean, it's miraculous. And it's so frustrating. Anyway, so the third noble truth then, once the cause has been identified as clinging and grasping, third noble truth is like this enormous light that says, the Buddha says, I have seen the cessation of dukkha. In other words, I have seen that there is an end. There is a way to end dukkha. There is a way to end the way we cause ourselves this suffering. And of course, in my case, it was, hey, Allan, you keep wanting something that you're not going to have. Let go of that and instead see what you do have. And that, I mean, what I have is miraculous and extraordinary and incredibly wonderful. I think I shocked people when after a while, it took certainly at least a year. And I wrote this at the end of the book, and the few people who have read it, because it's not published till February 5th, editor, publisher, critics, were surprised to read that I said at the end of the book, if there was some sort of a magic pill that I could take so that I could go back in time and that accident wouldn't happen, I wouldn't take that pill.
Yeah.
The only reason I'd want to go back would be so that my wife wouldn't be in pain.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because there's no such pill. But the point is that what has happened from that accident to me and for me would not have happened otherwise. All that I've learned, some of which is difficult to even express, but it's been an enormous learning experience. And as a teacher and an author, I know now that I am heard differently. I'm no longer someone who is sharing wisdom from my great teachers of the past, but I have literally been in the fire and I've gone through the flames. So when I say to you, you can also, people know that I know I've done this.
Right. Wow. So when you go back, I'm so mesmerized by your story, I've lost my place entirely.
Oh no.
Okay. So
that's good. You get to relax.
I know. I don't have to look at this anymore. So when you going through the Four Noble Truths, the first one, there is suffering. So you said, yeah, I'm suffering here. You know, I'm here. I've been a giver all my life now. I have to ask for help all the time. I miss my life. This is a suffering. And then you look and said, well, I'm grasping to what was versus what could be, or what I have right at this moment, which is this beautiful family and a beautiful life. That was was that the thing that allowed you to, so you understood what caused, you knew that there was suffering, you figured out the cause of suffering, and then what allowed you to move forward is focusing on what you did have versus what you didn't. But I always wonder, and I suffer this myself, is that when I say, oh, well, I'm going to just let go of this former life. You read so much about brain science and neuroscience and saying, well, your mind and what you're projecting about the future affects, your future, because you're literally building neuro pathways to whatever you're thinking. So there's a part of me that wonders, well, gosh, I wonder if you're thinking, well, I'm just accepting that I will be in this state, maybe forever, where I'll be dictating things, not using my hands, maybe not even, I don't know if you were able to even stand at that point. But, did you wonder whether, because there's all these spiritual ideas, one of which is, just accept, let go, accept, be with God, and just accept that you don't know what's going to happen next, and whatever happens will happen. And then there's this group of neuroscientists that say, no, you're thinking about negative things and just accepting and resigning. The worst case could happen because you're just accepting this life that you have now. Does that make sense? I mean, did you reconcile at all with those two things, or not? And what would you say to those people who think, well, don't you think all that kind of resignation and acceptance, or I guess you were more accepting, but does that acceptance harm you in any way? That's an awfully long question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, but it's a significant question. I don't think that acceptance means passivity or neutrality. I think it takes a great deal of wisdom to differentiate between what is acceptable and what is not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think it's essential to develop a sense of self-compassion so that you're not constantly beating a door down to get something that is just simply not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So it's the wisdom. I believe this is my 12-step program friends tell me of the Serenity Prayer. Mm-hmm. That requires the wisdom to differentiate between what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, mm-hmm. and then the wisdom to see the difference. So I think it's more than just accepting, it is moving forward as opposed to clinging to what can't be. So rather than a resignation, it becomes more of a determination. Mm. You mentioned you didn't even know if I could stand up. I couldn't at first. I couldn't stand and I couldn't walk, and I had trouble learning how to walk again. I remember feeling like a bad student. I understood what they were saying, and there were these nice kids, the PTs trying to help me, physical therapists, and I just couldn't do it, and I was scared. I was taller than all of them, so I would joke with them and say, you don't know what it's like to fall from up here. Yeah. You guys are only falling from 5'4". I'm falling 6'2". And I would get scared. Mm-hmm. And I would sometimes was desperate to get back and at least just sit on the edge of my bed. Mm-hmm. And they would let me do it, but I never ended a session that way. Mm. I said, please, we need to just try this one more time. And at least I could do something positive in the session. But it was very difficult to get back to walking. Later on, walking on the street, I felt very vulnerable and unsteady. But that led to my beginning the study of Tai Chi with a wonderful teacher. I began that over a year ago, and I love it. Love doing it. I've been through the entire form. He tells me I'm quite good at that, which they don't usually say. Yeah. And I practice every day. I probably do close to 2 hours a day of Tai Chi.
Wow.
It's been wonderful. So I prefer to look at the fact that struggling to walk has led me to something that I love doing.
Okay, so you're describing though, and I'm just going to reverse a little bit, and I would like to talk about Tai Chi too, but I want to reverse a little bit because you said there's this point where of discernment where you have to accept and then also use, instead of resign, use that as determination. So in the case of your walking, in your mind, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to accept what? That I may not walk, or that what did you have to accept, and then how did that convert into determination and will?
I never accepted the possibility that I wouldn't walk. I never even had a thought that I wouldn't walk. I just knew it was difficult. But I knew for my life to be the way I wanted it to be that I had to walk, and I was going to walk. So that was never in there.
And that's not grasping or clinging on to what was?
Well, again, there's a matter of wisdom and making decisions between what am I grasping to, or where am I using determination? And
Okay.
they're different.
It's really hard in that one, I think.
Oh, yeah. Oh, none of this is easy. I sometimes joke and say, look, if it was easy, why would the Buddha teach it? Why would anybody teach what's easy? We don't need those teachings.
Right. Yeah.
I'd show you from another perspective. One day, this would have been less than 5 months after the accident. So I wasn't teaching. I hadn't gone back to the community meditation center yet where I teach. Some of my students sent an emissary, I like to put it that way, and she said, we really need you. If just a tiny little group of us came, would you start teaching again? Just a handful of us. And that kind of scared me. I didn't know if I could. I didn't know if I would have enough strength to be able to be with them for an hour or two. I didn't know if my mind would be clear enough. Because I went through really bad ICU psychosis, which is a nice way of saying I was really nuts for a while. I went back to my performing days on Broadway. I was singing and I was doing monologues. I was having fun, but my family was really scared that I might not pull out of it.
Yeah.
So at this point, I didn't know how my mind would work, but I said yes. Small enough class to be in my living room, and the class would be based on your bringing questions, because I didn't know that I could prepare a class. When I did the first session with them, and I did it with 8 in my living room, 8 of my more advanced, experienced meditators, when that class was over, I was so uplifted because I realized my mind was clear. I answered every question, and I felt I answered, with the answers that were truthful and useful. And that was a big step. So it really wasn't so much about letting go or accepting as it was about moving forward. And I think that's really the way progress is made, that it's much easier to be moving forward rather than making a decision that I'll let go of such and such, because then where am I? I've let go of something. We don't like transitions.
Right.
Transition is not a comfortable state.
Right. So you didn't spend a lot of time saying, I'm going to let go of the notion that I'll walk like I used to, or I'm going to let go of, you're just like, I'm not going to think about that at all. I'm going to just move forward. I'm going to walk. I'm going to teach these classes. I'm moving forward. My energy is just focused on moving forward versus analyzing, thinking, wondering about the past.
I never considered the possibility that I wouldn't walk and that I would walk well.
Yeah.
I probably walked 95% as well as I did, and I don't notice the other 5%.
Yeah. Wow. What an incredible story.
Talk about somebody who's been incredibly fortunate.
Well, and you view it as a gift still, because you said it was, not the crisp. You would do it all over again if you had to, except for your wife's suffering. But when you look back in the trajectory of your life, how do you view this as a gift? I mean, in some odd way, it feels like the crowning jewel, before you pass, of something that you could learn so deeply. I mean, I don't know how you could learn the Four Noble Truths more deeply than experiencing what you've experienced. I don't know. When I read through it, I thought, oh gosh, he probably really gets that now.
Yes, again, we have to consider conditions. If I were 22 years old, I would, I'm sure, feel differently. Before the crash, I would never have made the decision to get in that plane if I knew it was going to crash. To say that I would do it over again feels slightly different than to say I wouldn't give it back.
Okay.
To do it over again means I have the option to not do it, and I would undoubtedly take the option not to do it.
Right.
I'm not a fool.
Right.
But having had it happen, then I don't look back and say, oh, I would do anything for this not to have happened. It happened, and there have been so many gifts that have come from it. Again, I think I might have said this, but as a teacher, I know that I'm heard differently now. And also, I'm sure that it has changed my life. I don't see how it couldn't change my life. Sometimes I have said to people, you know, the best moment in my life ever that has ever happened, this moment right now. This moment with you right now is the best moment ever in my life. Because this is the only moment in which life actually happens. Everything before this is memory. Everything in the future may or may not happen. Projection. But this moment, I get to live, I get to share it with you and anyone who shares to look at this with us, and that's great.
Lovely. Tell us a little bit more about the book and what it's about, and please hold it up again so folks can get it.
Yeah, it's a great cover, I think.
It's beautiful.
I was wondering how they would create a cover for a book like this. So notice the heat of the colors, but then, if I don't know how well you can see this, but woven into that are the beautiful kind of lotus flowers.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Peace coming out of that.
Yes.
And I'm absolutely thrilled that Sharon Salzberg wrote the foreword to this book, because she rarely does that. The book is really in response to all of the people who have asked so many questions about how did I survive this, and mostly they're asking, how come you're happy? You shouldn't be happy. You know, you went through something that was really terrible.
Yeah.
You know, I make no attempt in this book to sugarcoat this.
Yeah.
And I have written avisos at the front of the book. Please, in the beginning section, in the section called Christmas, please go slowly. This was a real event. I do not exaggerate it in any way, but it was a horrible experience. And I think it's necessary to read that in order to get what comes after that, what has been learned from that event, that situation, so that the reader doesn't say, well, yes, but you don't know what I'm going through. And no, I don't know what you're going through, but I can tell you about what I went through, and from that experience, I can say to anyone, you can do this. That doesn't mean you can walk again. It doesn't mean that you have more than 30 days or so to live, if that's what the doctors are saying. It doesn't mean that. It means that you don't necessarily have to suffer with that. And that's what this book is about, the various practices that have been my experience through time that help us view life's events as they really are, without our add-ons and our stories. And if that's not clear, just a very simple example, you're walking along and you twist your ankle on the sidewalk, something I, as a New Yorker, can experience at any time. Now that hurts. You twist your ankle and it hurts, and so, ouch. How quickly then the mind goes, oh, now I'm going to be late to work, and I was late to work yesterday, they're going to fire me, and I'm going to lose this job, and I lost my last job, and I'm always losing jobs, and that's why I have no career, and that's why I have no relationships, because everybody hates me, and that's why I'm just a loser. Wait a minute. You twisted your ankle. You're not a loser. You're not losing your job. Those are the storylines. We characterize ourselves by thoughts and feelings and sensations, and we don't have to do that.
Yeah, this is my husband make this signal whenever I'll say, "Oh yeah, this happened," and he'll go.
Yes.
Like some
Right.
crazy story that I'm going to spin out of control, and we just laugh. And now this is our signal for like, yeah, that's your story.
Exactly.
And we laugh at how ridiculous our stories are. I mean, they're fun to share because we know that they're ridiculous stories, but you know, it's nice to get them off your chest. And once you recognize it's a story, you're like, okay, I'm done. But I just need to get it off my chest.
No, exactly. And it's there's nothing wrong with having thoughts, feelings, etc. It's absolutely what we do as human beings.
Yeah.
The mind experiences thoughts, we experience feelings, but it's not getting caught up in them that we want to watch out for. Not getting caught up because I tripped on the sidewalk, I'm the most awkward person in the world. I don't deserve to be here.
Right.
Because that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Even if it's the 15th time that you trip.
Yes.
All it means is, hey, be careful, you'll get hurt.
Right. Don't walk that way. Walk around next time.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Allan Lokos. You can find his website, ALLANLOKOS.com, and make sure to get his book Through the Flames. I assume you're also, for folks in New York, check out are you teaching community at the Community Meditation Center now?
Every Sunday.
Every Sunday.
It's a Wednesday night class. It's on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. There are a lot of events going on in the city and around the country. On my website, on the schedule page, people will see when I'm where, what television events, a lot of radio events, etc.
Yeah. It's really cool to see someone who's really walking their truth. I mean, I'm asking you these questions, but I feel that this is it. You know what I mean? Where some people, they say they're Buddhist, and then I can see them yelling and cussing at their kids, which is normal, right? But I really don't see. I've been testing you the whole time, and you're completely congruent. I'm impressed because I think it takes a lot, and I think you have a huge amount of faith and conviction to actually really walk this walk that you've walked. It's beautiful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm having fun.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.